Today we're heading over to Verite. It's a catamaran. We're gonna have a discussion. What's better, cat versus mono? Of course, I want mono to win, but I think Greg might think differently.
Made possible by you.
I see all this stuff about cats versus mono. Let's get ready to rumble. Love you, boat.
Welcome aboard Verite.
And this is the mono versus cat video. Of course, we're on a cat because it's
There's no
a lot
room
more
on the mono.
Yeah, there's no room on my boat. But anyways, so I wanted to go over cat versus mono. You've sailed both. Cheers.
Cheers.
I think first of all we have to understand that sailing, whether you're on a monohull or a catamaran, it's the differences are in the livability. Both will get you there equally as safe if sailed correctly, and I think it comes down in the end to dollars versus comfort. And having sailed both, I believe that a catamaran offers more normal life living ability. Normal being like what we're used to in our homes.
It's almost like a condo in here.
It is.
You have the balcony, you've got a big living space on the inside, your living room, and then you've got your big master room with a couple bedrooms, you know. So it's almost just like a condo.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
That's one of the things that we don't get on the monohull is, you know, you go down, my wife says, down in the dungeon. And it's basically like that. You go down in the dungeon and then you know, do everything down there, but you spend most of your time in the cockpit, where your cockpit is huge. And that's a huge difference. So the livability, I think, is so much nicer on the cat than the monohull. So I give that one totally to the catamaran, because the life is so much nicer at anchor.
I guess when you're a cruising person, then most of your life, whatever we like to think, is spent anchored somewhere, and to have the openness and freedom and space of a catamaran is a great luxury. But it comes at a cost. And we have two hulls in the catamaran. Obviously there's two motors, so in many areas you have double everything of that of a monohull. You know, you can get away with one autopilot. We have the luxury of two. So the cost is a big part of choosing a monohull or a catamaran. There's no question about it. And you know, Phil Burns said to us a long time ago, watching a sunset on a 30-foot boat is the same as watching it on a 50-foot boat. Well, that applies to a catamaran or a monohull. So to get out there and be doing it is equally as important as what you're doing it on. But if you have the wherewithal and the ability to afford a catamaran, then I would say definitely that is going to give you a much more peaceful life and a much more relaxed life, I think, especially from Wendy's perspective.
Yeah, I think to get the amount of space that we have in a monohull, then you have to go really quite big. And then if you go that big, then you're going to need crew. And so one of the things, you know, that I would not like to have is crew. I think the nice thing about this size catamaran, or even You know, I know that around 44, 45 feet are very popular in catamarans because they're very manageable for two people, and then you're not depending on somebody else and having other people that you have to think about. So I think when you go away cruising, you want to go away cruising and be relaxed and do your own thing. You know, if you want to jump off the back without your clothes on, you can do that. But if you've got crew, then I wouldn't feel right about doing that. So
Delos does it.
yeah, no, that's right. And a lot of people do, which is fine. But yeah, I suppose it depends on the crew. But I think it's nice just to just do your own thing. You know, two people on a boat. This, you know, we've got a lot of space here for two people, and we managed to take up all of it. But we have had family on board, and it's been so comfortable having family on board as well. We've had all cabins taken, so we've had a young couple in the front in the V berth, and our daughter and her partner in the back cabin, and ourselves on the other side. It was very comfortable. Everybody had space. People spent time up moon watching on the top, sleeping up there even under the stars.
Yep.
Got a little bit cold and a little bit damp, but they eventually came in about 3 in the morning. But you know, there's enough boat to be able to kind of share it around.
But again, it comes back to a cost. So 2 motors, 2 lots of maintenance, 2 propellers, 2 rudders,
2 hulls to clean.
2 hulls to clean. So when I clean the hull, it's 100 feet of hull. Gets a bit tedious sometimes.
It doesn't go as deep as...
No.
That's right.
No, it only draws 1.2, but nevertheless, still a lot of underwater work.
Yeah, I'm at 2.1, and I don't like going down to the bottom of the keel, cleaning that off. That's a pain.
Yeah, really.
Right now you have 3 diesel engines on board. You have 1 for your generator and 2 for your motors. In the future, I don't think you're going to have a generator on board.
No, I agree.
And it's so much easier on a Cat because you have more solar space. That way, right now you're charging at 65 amps sometimes?
Yes.
Most generators are only supplying 65 amps most of the time.
That's right.
And having to put fuel in them.
Yeah, exactly. And change the oil. And do all the maintenance. You know,
Repairs, spare parts.
let's wait till he goes by.
Well, as you know, catamaran is 2 hulls, therefore it doesn't heel like a monohull obviously heels, and when the power gets up in the sails it pushes the mast over and depowers the rig. On a catamaran you don't get that. You get 1 or 2 degrees shift and maybe a little bit more, so you have to pay a little bit more attention to stresses on your rig and make sure that you do your reefing before it gets too powered up. Modern cats are so strongly built that it's not a problem of them tipping over. Very, very unlikely. In fact, I've never heard of one. But so it's a bit more of a short, sharp action as the waves go under the hull, rather than a slow action of a monohull. But in almost any weather, Wendy and I can sit here and have breakfast with a cup of tea and nothing goes sliding around the deck. So, you know, there's certain things that make it more livable that way. You're walking around the deck is flat. So from a safety aspect, it's a little bit nicer. It doesn't have, and having raced monohulls for a long time, the actual sound of a boat moving through the water, there's none of that on the catamaran. There's silence. And on a monohull you get that real surging noise sound as you cut through the water, which is I like. But you don't get that on a catamaran. But
what about the jerky movement? I've heard several mono cat sailors that said that there's a jerking movement when you're going over the waves, the way it jerks.
If you have, depending on the size of the catamaran, but you'll get, if they're not set up properly, catamaran will hobby horse. It'll do that. It's more of a side-on when you get a beam or a side-on swell or wave, especially when you're anchored and boats' wakes are coming past. You'll get a small jerkiness rather than the monohull will ride up over them. There's a little bit more jiggling goes on.
Well, what about going through the waves, having the waves hit?
No, we don't have any of that.
You've never had that?
We have none of that slapping that
on the bridge
on
deck.
the bridge deck.
It does happen. Not on the, we haven't had it happen, but
different catamarans. We've heard people. One woman we met at a boat show in Miami, and they just brought a cat from South Africa, and she was just traumatized from the slapping that was happening on a low bridge deck. It's really fatiguing. So
it does, apparently it does feel like you're being hit by a block of concrete as the wave slams into the body.
So it depends on the height of the bridge deck.
But I think
Doesn't it?
more the modern cats over the last 10 years or more, they've now increased the bridge deck height and the shape of the hulls and the way that the entry is, so that it funnels that through rather than having it slam. It actually cuts it and pushes it through. But very rarely you might get a bit of a knock or something, but not a slam, not anything that would rattle your teeth. Although I know in the early catamarans that was definitely a fatiguing factor, especially more so actually when you're going downwind, because you're pushing into the back of waves, reaching a little bit, but otherwise we don't experience that, which is nice.
So now I'd like to talk a little bit about going into a marina.
Mm-hmm.
My boat is very maneuverable because I have the bow thruster,
Yes.
so I can spin it and move it however I want. And you have the same thing because you have two engines. You
Yes.
can come in. But what about if you had to come in on one engine?
Coming with a catamaran, one engine is almost impossible. It's not impossible. It is
difficult.
very difficult, because the engine, the hull without the propulsion is a drag, and so it becomes a nightmare. We actually had one engine down for quite a while when we were sailing through Indonesia, and it was not a problem motoring, sailing, anything like that. But to start off, we had to sort of start off and go in a bit of a circle to get up. Once we got a bit of speed up, we had no problem with steerage. But the first instance, when you're first trying to get moving, it just didn't want to steer, and you would need assistance in a confined area like a marina.
Dinghy helping you.
Yes, it would be very, very difficult.
Just like us, if we didn't have the bow thruster, I would call for assistance.
Sure. Well, if you lost an engine,
Yeah.
it's very difficult with no engine.
Right.
At least we have one spare.
Sailing up to a dock, I don't think that's going to happen.
No, definitely not.
Seen it done, but
Yes.
yeah.
Not on a 50-foot.
No.
No.
I don't think that
There's
happens.
no brakes. The problem.
No.
Yeah. If you go into a marina, I think it's 1.5 at Yacht Haven.
Yes.
1.5 more than mine.
Yes.
So a 50-foot boat
0.5
monohull
more.
versus a 50-foot cat, you guys pay 1.5 more.
That's if we go into a pen, an actual pen. If we go alongside, like where we were parked at
Mhm.
Yacht Haven, we pay
There's
the
no
same.
difference.
And the reason for that is we're in probably a 3 metre deep section where most monohulls couldn't go. They could get in there, but with the tide shifts that we have here, they'd be high and dry. So it allows the Marina to actually have another paying area,
Using
a
alongside.
shower, and we come alongside. If we go into a pen, then we would pay the 1.5.
But the thing is, what I wanted to get into was, you guys pay 1.5 more than a 50-foot monohull, but you have 3 times the space as a 50-foot monohull.
Yes, we have this boat is a bit over 1,000 square feet.
So what width-wise, we'd be double at least, well, more than double, I suppose.
Double.
Yeah, more than double.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's right.
So you think
I don't
we
think
should be
it's.
paying more?
I don't think it's fair that in some places, you know, that people say, oh, we should pay the same, you know, as a catamaran. I don't think that's fair. I think if you're taking up more real estate, then you have to pay more money.
In some marinas now, they actually
Square
charge you
foot.
by the
By
square.
makes
square foot.
sense.
I've actually seen that.
Yes,
That makes
Seen that
sense.
done.
I think it's a good idea.
that's fair enough. It's real estate, so
Yeah, they're looking at the top of the boat and saying, you take up this much.
That's right.
This much square feet, you pay per the square foot that you
Well,
take
if
up.
they've got a pen and it usually takes 2 monohulls and you can only fit 1 catamaran in there, then really you should be paying double.
I actually think the cats make out right now. If
Yeah.
it's 1.5,
Yes.
because you got 3 times the space,
Yeah.
and you pay 1.5 times the
we're doing well.
yeah, and it's a lot better lifestyle because you have so much.
Yes. Yes. It's difficult, and that is one of the expenses of a catamaran in Europe, especially in the Med. Catamarans are very expensive to pen, because they charge you by the square footage.
One of the things with livability we should just mention real quick is the dinghy launch system that a cat has versus the dinghy launch system that most of the monohulls have around here, and it's so much nicer on your boat. You know, some of the bigger boats, you know, the ML 54, you know, they can sustain a heavy davit off the back, but my boat, I can't really, you know, pull up my dinghy with the motor attached. It's just too heavy. I don't like to put that much weight on the back, whereas you guys, it really doesn't matter what it weighs. You guys can pull it up.
No, it's very easy. I mean, Greg was away from the boat at one stage and I was on the boat on my own. I can deploy the dinghy very easily myself, very quickly as well, and bring it back up again, no problem.
Yeah, that's nice.
So yes, it does have a bearing. A monohull, you can basically, within reason, load them up, and it doesn't affect the performance. But most catamarans, when you see the performance figures on them, are based on an empty catamaran. Probably little to no fuel, no water, no spare parts, no living equipment, dive gear, all the rest of it. Once they get loaded up, they're not as quick as what they are empty. So yes, you can put a dinghy on the back and with a bigger outboard, but you are going to affect your performance. So a cruiser, it doesn't matter. Who cares if you go a half knot slower or even a knot slower?
Yeah, for the convenience of having a good sized dinghy. Our dinghy's a good size. We've been diving off it, you know, with 4 people will take all the dive gear, go diving, and it's fantastic. And so it's been good to have. And if you need to go a fair distance rather than have a little small dinghy, it's good to have a big dinghy.
Yeah.
So, and to be able to carry that on the back, we've reduced the weight of that one. It had a centre console and seats and everything else. Greg stripped it down bare to just a motor and the dinghy. So.
Yeah, Greg said that he liked his big dinghy.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. It's a boy thing.
Oh, no, I think it's a practical thing.
Let's talk a little bit about performance. What is your cruising speed with side wind 20 knots?
Wow. Side wind 90 degrees.
Yeah.
So it's not quite it's a reach. 20 knots. 12, 13 knots.
Do you want to go that fast? Or would you
It's
read
comfortable
down?
at that.
12 knots is comfortable.
Yeah, and that would be, we would, if that was 20 knots, we would have at least, we'd have a reef in. If it was sustained 20 knots, we'd have a first reef in, and probably the solent. Yes, the solent. So, and we would still be at 10 to 12 knots with those two, with the reef in.
10 knots would be amazing if you could sustain that. You could make the crossing from Panama to the Marquesas in 16, 17 days, 16 days.
When we left, where did we, to go to Bandar, we left from, what was the name of those islands? It was a day and a half sailing with a great beam reach, trade winds, and about a 3-metre sea, 3.5-metre sea, and we were humming along 13 to 15 knots, reaching 17 to 18 knots occasionally. Safe as houses. Never felt on the autopilot while we sat here and had dinner. I mean, you know, it sounds crazy, but it was
steady wind though.
It was constant beam reach, and it was just unbelievable. So it's not uncommon for us to be able to do 200 nautical miles in a day. We've done it quite a number of times.
We've done it 3 times.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's great.
200 nautical miles, but that's averaging 8.5 knots.
Sure.
And just 24 hours.
Yeah,
we did it 3 times when we were crossing the Pacific.
Yeah, beautiful. We would average, I would say we would average overall about 8 knots.
Yeah, I think
That's
if you took it over a day, who knows what the weather is, but 8 knots is 8 to 9 knots is a fairly constant sort of speed.
Yeah, when we do our crossing calculations, we say 6 to 6.5.
Yes,
depending on the winds.
We do too.
That's
being pessimistic.
Well, yeah, being on the safe side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I generally work
Conservative.
between 6 to 7, and make adjustments according to the weather.
Because it really doesn't matter if you make it one day later.
No, not at all.
It's better to be comfortable.
Better to get there.
Yeah, especially the more that
Not
you
be scared out of your wits.
Yeah,
Or break something.
Exactly. So
Yeah, definitely. I put everything under strain. Yeah, I mean, it's rare that we'd be up in the 10 knots. Really.
No, I disagree. No, 10, 11, 12, and that's if we're on a beam reach or we've got the big headsail up and a full main. We're quite often doing 10 or 11.
Yeah,
12.
that's true actually.
If it's not gusty, you can do it.
Yeah,
But,
no gusty.
Once you get into gusty winds, then
Yeah.
you gotta err on the safe side.
Sure, it's not
Take
worth
some
it.
sail down.
Yep, it's not worth it, and it's not a race. So, we're carrying probably I don't know how many tons of extra, lots. So we're not in this for a race. We're just in it to be comfortable. And if there's no wind, we've got lots of sails, 2 spinnakers if we need them. So it's
We
still
run
comfortable.
the engines as well if there's no wind.
Yeah, quite often
We
we'll
don't-
run.
We don't wait around for wind really.
Quite often we'll run one engine with the sails, create a little bit of our own wind, and one engine in 4 or 5 knots of breeze, 60 degrees, 65 degrees, we'll be doing 6 knots, 7 knots at about 1200 RPM.
Yeah,
It's great.
and that's quite economical for the engines as well.
Yes.
If
And
we
not
get
even
up
2
over
litres an hour.
Okay, the last thing I'd like to talk about is blue water cats. There's not very many of them that are real blue water cats. And when you were looking for a boat, which boats were you looking at seriously? Because I don't want to put down any boat name, but there's a couple that they sell a lot of. There's a lot of them out there, and I don't think you were looking for a lagoon. But other than that, which ones really ticked your box for a blue water boat?
Well, I guess having met other people who've sailed many different catamarans now, any of them are safe if you sail them properly, if you are careful. I think we were looking for something that we had confidence in, that had a proven track record as far as solid workmanship on the performance side, because I'm a guy and I like to go fast if I can, not all the time. So we started off by going to the Miami Boat Show and Fort Lauderdale Boat Show, and we went to France to the Saint Michel Boat Show, and
La Rochelle?
La Rochelle.
No,
it wasn't La Rochelle, but it was.
It's down near Montpellier.
Yeah, it's near Montpellier, and we looked at the Dean, we looked at Nordatec, Antares, and actually not a plug, but Antares is a boat that we have a bit of an affinity with, because it was the first boat catamaran we sailed, and we sailed one from Buenos Aires to Rio, and we sailed one from Miami up to Boston a couple of times.
Yeah.
And must admit that was a very nice, for our opinion, a little bit old-fashioned, but it's been upgraded now, but a very nice, comfortable boat. But we still fell in love when we first saw this boat in 2008, the Catana 50 at the Miami Boat Show. It just felt like it had everything we were looking for. One of the drawbacks of a Catana, if it is a drawback, is the helms are situated on the hulls in the open, and I don't mind that. We've got a little bimini over the top of our nav area, but it gives you a great feel of, like on a monohull, as far as sailing, you get the feel of the breeze. But many of the newer catamarans, the Balance, the HH50, that's still got the hull steering on the outside, have now got steering in protected inside as well, or centre steering.
We looked at gunboat as well. We loved the gunboat, for instance, when we were looking. The boats we looked at, and Greg was looking extensively on the internet, so he had spreadsheets on all different boats. This one sold, that one sold, etc., etc. But it was mainly the boats you were mainly looking at were Catana, gunboat. We would keep an eye on the gunboat, but we knew that they were way out of our range as far as price was concerned.
$3 million. They're 60 feet, aren't they?
Well, they vary, I think.
They have a whole range of them now, 3 or 4 different sizes.
So, but also they're very utilitarian, and that's another thing. Some of our friends have had, catamarans as well, and they're just too scant inside, just as a liveaboard. They're great for the Sydney Harbour. This particular one I'm thinking of was built in Sydney, and it was basically for a weekend and for the Sydney Harbour. But now it's doing blue water running, and it just didn't feel solid enough. It didn't feel like it would go the distance. It did go the distance. It got run into one time, and basically got run into. You could see straight into the cabin. With our boat, we got run into in Indonesia. A boat came in, lost its engines. A big catamaran, 60-foot catamaran, came in and ran into the side of us, and made a slight dent in it, which then popped out again. The dent and no problem, you know, no big hole. So it was more, you know, the safety aspect, of the solidity, the solidness of Catana.
There was
the thing.
one other one we were looking at, the
I don't remember.
not Frontal Vision, the other one. Anyway, it was another French boat. But what we were looking for, pretty much the Catana 50 supplied the most ticks on the columns. Yes and no's, yes, no, yes, no. And it just offered what we felt comfortable with. And when we bought it second hand, we could afford to buy it. We couldn't afford to buy a new one. So that catamarans are expensive. There's no question.
Especially
But
the performance cats, you know, like the Catana, and you're getting up there. The people who originally bought this boat in France, they just ticked every box. You know, they just said, we'll have everything, whatever, you know, they'd never sailed before. That's another thing. This couple that bought this boat originally, neither one of them had ever sailed before. And they set off, they were written up in blue water sailing. And as, you know, like these people, almost crazy, I suppose, you know, just set off and, yeah.
Kind of like Javilla and me.
Yes, that's not the only
Very
one.
similar.
We've met so many people now who are just like that. Just never sailed before and off they go. We'll buy a boat and away they go. You can learn along the way as long as you're cautious, not a problem.
Yeah. So I'm going to sum this up after this boat goes by.
What was this?
And they're expensive to maintain. And if Greg wasn't doing it all himself.
Yeah. And there's some things you can't do. Like you got to call the Volvo guy once in a while to check, make sure that everything's okay. You got to call the, you know, own-end guy once in a while to check your gen set.
Yeah,
You got
serviced.
You got to do those things.
You do.
Once in a while. So you have to pay somebody. And I think maybe it's a little bit low. I've always said, you know, about 1,500 per month on our boat. That's about what we spend, but we might spend a little bit more because over a while you have to upgrade things.
Yes.
The expensive things you have to upgrade.
It's hard to know, actually.
Especially
the
when
price.
you drop in new batteries.
Yeah, but we didn't have to pay as much as other people had to pay. We got a really good deal.
Smoking deal.
So I want to sum this up. If you want to go blue water, you know, sailing in a catamaran, I think it's going to be much more expensive. But the lifestyle is going to be that much better. But you know, we'll take for an instance, to get a good blue water cat, you're going to at least spend $500,000 to $600,000. To get a good blue water monohull, you might spend $150,000 or more. That's, I think, the lower limit. But you can find things cheaper than that.
Well, friends of ours, they bought a Fontaine Peugeot, and I think it was under 300,000, and
about a 48.
48 maybe,
Yeah.
but the older model, Baja, I think, and fantastic boat, and everything in it that they wanted, and it was in their budget what they wanted to spend, and so I think you can, you know, get a good catamaran out there for less than that.
You could get a good, for under 300 you could buy a very nice catamaran.
Not
a
like
new
this,
one.
though. Not like this.
No. This, I'm talking something between 40 and 45 feet, and something that's probably 5 to 12 years old, maybe a bit more. No, 8 to 14 years old.
Yeah.
Yes, but they're available, and as long as they're well looked after, it's the same as a monohull.
Yeah, I mean, you can get some really, really.
Well, you can
great
get some good
boats.
deals on monohulls too. You can get
for sure.
you can get $100,000 boat, you know, and you could sail around the world on it.
Sure.
For sure.
But, you know, to go around the world in comfort without having to worry about, you know, an older boat,
Yeah.
I think you're going to be spending much more.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, for the peace of mind. Yeah. But you know, this boat that I'm talking about would definitely go around the world without any problem. It's very sturdy, very good boat,
Fast.
very well maintained, and I know it was under 300,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in the end, I think the Cat's going to be much more comfortable, but much more expensive.
Yes.
And the monohull, though cheaper, less space, and it's just not as comfortable.
It's more available to more people. You know, I think the monohulls, there's a lot of them for sale. You know, that's where we were absolutely amazed when we went to Newport at how many boats there were for sale there, monohulls for sale. It was frightening. Every creek that was there that ran up, there was miles of boats for sale.
I think what you're saying is true. I do think you see a lot more second-hand, because there's a scarcity factor with catamarans, so they hold their value very well. But you know, over the years, as more and more are being built, there's a lot more catamarans being built. I'm not going to say the monohulls, but certainly, you know, 20 years ago they were rarity. Now they're common. Even the trimarans are, you know, the new trimarans that are coming out are amazing. So multi-hull has become more a mainstream and not an abnormal situation.
I don't think people are as frightened of them as they were. You know,
no.
there was the whole thing about them breaking in half and
Tipping
over and all of that sort of thing. When we first started looking, that was the horror stories that people were telling us. Oh no, you can't buy a catamaran.
Oh, if they tip over, they'll never come back up.
Yeah, but then the
Yes,
other
they
person
don't
said
sink
if a
though.
monohull goes straight to the bottom.
They don't sink, and they don't they don't really turn over. I haven't heard of any. Well, I think I did hear of one,
Yeah,
but there's a lot of
flipping.
There's a lot of them out there, and
But that's what I'm saying. More and more, there's going to become more catamarans on the market at a lower price. And certainly you can buy catamarans now for in the 200 mark, 150 mark, that are 15 years old, still very, very good boats.
Solid.
Yeah. They weren't production boats, they were one-off type boats, but very well built nevertheless.
I think it just comes down to the platform, you know, and then what you've got on it.
Sure.
You know, you can have a great platform. You can have like this boat, and then just have junk equipment on it.
True.
And it's not going to be comfortable to live on.
No.
That's so true.
And that's one of the things that people really have to think about when they buy a boat. What's on the boat? What's a boat come with?
God,
Because you can spend, you know, $3,000 or $4,000 just on the tools. You can spend, you know, $10,000 on your dinghy and engine, and then, you know, when you start adding up all the little things that come with a used boat, sometimes it's much better to buy the used boat because they've already put all this stuff onto the boat,
Yes.
rather than you going and spending, oh, I've got to buy this, and I got to buy this, and I got to buy this.
Huge.
And, you
People
know,
have no idea. I had no idea how much stuff goes onto a boat. You know, just incredible. And it's expensive to go and buy all these things. The parts that you have to carry. You know, especially if you're in a remote area like Indonesia, or, you know, most of the places that you want to sail are going to be remote because you don't want to be around a big city where you can get parts. So you're going to have one of everything that's on your boat, pretty much. At least.
yeah.
If
We,
not,
on Aquarius, we have about $10,000 worth of spare parts.
Yeah.
God,
yeah.
we'd have. I
We'd
hate to
easily
think.
that.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people realize just how much, and you rely on those spare parts.
For sure you do.
Your water pump goes down. Well, you better have an extra one, because your wife is going to be really upset if she can't have fresh water in the bathrooms and the sink.
Yes.
No,
Or a shower, yes.
yeah, there's a million things that you don't want to be without, you know, and things that your life depends on, not just water.
Yeah.
Things that you absolutely have to have parts for. And know how to use the parts too. Know what to do with them.
I think you only have to start thinking about your sheets and halyards, spare rope,
Gosh.
and shackles and clamps and
Yeah,
pulleys
because
and
if you buy a
winch
new
handles.
boat, it comes bare. You know, it's almost like, oh, you wanted a motor with that, or you wanted sails with that. Really?
I don't think people realize, you know, when we bought our boat, I think we spent around $65,000-$70,000 outfitting it
Yeah,
for us.
definitely.
Unbelievable.
So that was 1/3 of the cost of the boat.
That's right.
We actually just put another 1/3 in
Yep.
to get it to where we wanted it,
Yeah.
and it's still not perfect.
They
never will be.
No, it never
There's
will
always
be.
changes you can make.
No.
Yeah, whereas this boat, you know, someone could just step on, we could step off, they could step on and go.
Yeah, no, I've been through this boat, and I know that's true.
And you know, I would not even bat an eyelid in saying to someone, you know, we'll get off, you get on, and off you go. There's chicken in the freezer. And beer in the fridge.
Yeah.
I think that's a wrap. What do you think?
Good.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Sounds good.
If you like this video, give us a like down below and click here to subscribe. That really helps us. And if you want to watch more of us, click one of those.